She had only $3 to her name, and it wasn't enough to buy her dignity. The man she'd been set up with humiliated her in front of everyone, and just when she thought things couldn't get worse, they did. Stranded. Alone. But this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning of a twist no one saw coming. But someone was watching from the shadows. Someone who saw more than just the girl with $3 in her pocket. Someone who would change her life forever. You won't believe what happens next. But first, let me know where you're watching from. Drop a comment below. Do you think she'll rise from this? And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button. You don't want to miss how this story unfolds. Trust me. She had only $3 to her name, and it wasn't enough to buy her dignity. The man she was supposed to meet for a blind date had barely looked at her when she arrived. He was everything she wasn't. Polished, confident, dressed in a crisp suit that cost more than her entire month's rent. Lily sat at the small table, her fingers nervously playing with the edge of the napkin, her eyes scanning the menu, though she knew she couldn't afford anything on it. The waiter came and went, a polite smile on his face, oblivious to the tension brewing. She had tried her best. She wore the best dress she could afford, tried to tame her unruly hair, and even borrowed a necklace from a friend. But it wasn't enough. Then he finally arrived. James. Tall, dark-haired. His presence seemed to command the room as he walked toward her, a perfect picture of wealth and superiority. His eyes flicked over her quickly, a momentary glance that told her everything she needed to know. He sat down without a word, pulling out his phone and tapping away as though she wasn't even there. She forced a smile, trying to break the ice. "It's nice to meet you." He barely looked up. "Yeah, whatever." His voice was cold, uninterested. "I don't have time for small talk." Lily froze, her heart sinking into her stomach. She had hoped for a kind word, something to give her a sense of validation, even if only for the night. But instead, she felt invisible, unimportant. She swallowed hard, trying to hold her composure, knowing this date, this small spark of hope she'd clung to, was crumbling around her. The silence stretched, suffocating. Finally, he put his phone down, eyes landing on her with a hint of disdain. "So, what's your deal? I'm assuming you don't come from money, right?" He smirked, looking at her plain, mismatched shoes. Lily's face flushed. Her throat tightened. "I'm not from money, no." Her voice was barely above a whisper, but it was the truth. He laughed, the sound sharp, cruel. "I figured. It's always funny when people like you think they're worth the time. You'll never be able to keep up with someone like me." The words stung like a slap across her face. She looked down, her fingers gripping the edge of the table. Her heart raced in her chest. She wanted to say something, anything to defend herself, to stand tall and show him she was more than just a maid in a cheap dress. But her throat was dry, the words stuck. He stood up suddenly, throwing a couple of bills on the table, more than enough to cover the meal. "I'm done here." He gave her one last glance, a look that was more pity than anything else. "Next time, don't waste my time." And with that, he left. No apology, no second glance, just the cold, unforgiving reality that people like him saw people like her as nothing more than a momentary distraction. She sat there, staring at the $3 bill in front of her. It was the only thing she had left now, just $3, and even that felt like too much. Too much for someone who didn't belong in his world. Her eyes stung, but she blinked the tears away. Lily gathered her courage and stood. She wasn't going to cry here, not in front of the same people who had watched her get humiliated. She wasn't going to let him see how much his words hurt. The waiter came over, glancing at the pile of bills James had left. Lily placed the $3 bill in front of him. The waiter raised an eyebrow but said nothing. "Keep the change," she muttered as she turned and walked out, the weight of the humiliation pressing down on her shoulders. She stepped outside, her heart heavy, her dreams shattered. But she kept walking, refusing to let herself break down. This wasn't the end. No, she wouldn't let it be. Something inside her refused to let this define her. As she walked down the street, the cold night air hit her face, but she didn't flinch. She kept walking, because no matter how small the steps, she knew she had to keep moving forward. The night wasn't over, and neither was her story. Maxwell Black had been watching her for longer than he cared to admit. From his position at the bar, he had seen the entire exchange. Every word James had thrown at her, every slight, every rejection. It was hard to miss, considering how loudly it echoed through the quiet restaurant. Maxwell wasn't accustomed to feeling much, least of all pity for someone he didn't know. But there was something about Lily, the way she carried herself after being humiliated, that intrigued him. Most people would have crumbled under such public disdain, but not her. He had seen many people come and go through his life, wealthy, powerful, desperate. Yet Lily, with her quiet dignity, was different. He watched as she stood up, took the $3 and left. He knew she wouldn't break. He could see it in her eyes. A quiet defiance, as if she refused to let the world decide who she was. She was stubborn, proud in a way that made her intriguing, and that made her dangerous. His mind wandered back to his own past, to the things he had left behind, things that still haunted him. He didn't want to feel anything, not for her, not for anyone, but somehow he couldn't shake the image of her walking away, head held high despite the hurt. He should have left it at that. Walk away, forget about it. But Maxwell wasn't the kind of man to leave things unfinished. He had always liked the thrill of making a difference, controlling outcomes. It was how he ran his business, and tonight it would be no different. The following morning, Lily had just finished her shift at the hotel, still carrying the weight of last night's embarrassment, when a sleek black car pulled up in front of the employee entrance. The driver rolled down the window, revealing a man in a sharp suit. "Miss Evans?" the driver asked. Lily frowned, unsure whether to walk away or ask him what he wanted. "I'm here for Mr. Black," he continued. "He would like to speak with you." Maxwell Black. The name barely registered. Who would want to speak with her? Her life was simple. Clean rooms, serve guests, go home, nothing more. Still she hesitated. There was something strange about the invitation. Who was he? And why would he want anything to do with her? "I'm afraid I don't know him," Lily replied, her voice cautious. "Mr. Black insists," the driver said. "He's offering you an opportunity. I'm to take you to him now." Lily's instinct screamed at her to walk away, to keep her head down. But curiosity gnawed at her, and before she knew it, she was climbing into the car. The drive was quiet, the streets of the city blurring past as the car headed toward an unfamiliar part of town. She had lived in the city long enough to know the wealthier neighborhoods, the parts of town she didn't dare enter. But today, she was heading straight into the heart of them. The car finally stopped in front of a modern glass building, sleek and intimidating. Maxwell's office. Her heart raced. What could he possibly want with her? Was this another cruel joke? She almost turned back, but before she could think twice, the driver ushered her inside. Maxwell was waiting for her in an office high above the city, the skyline stretching endlessly behind him. He stood as she entered, his tall figure imposing but not unkind. His eyes studied her with the same quiet intensity she had seen the night before. "Miss Evans," he greeted, his voice smooth but direct. "Please sit." Lily hesitated but finally took the seat across from him. She didn't speak, unsure of what to say. Maxwell's gaze never wavered. "I'm sure you're wondering why I've asked you here." Lily nodded, her mind still reeling from the shock of the invitation. "I don't understand. What do you want with me?" "I've been watching you," he said, as though it were the simplest thing in the world. "I've seen how you handled yourself last night, how you refused to let your dignity slip even when others would have collapsed under the weight of it." He paused, as though letting his words settle. "I admire that." Lily blinked, taken aback by his bluntness. "You admire that?" Her voice shook slightly. Why? Because I didn't break? Maxwell's lips quirked into a faint smile. Yes, because you didn't break. You see, most people in your position would have been desperate for validation. They would have begged for another chance. But you didn't. Lily's mind raced. She felt a mix of confusion and skepticism. What did he expect her to say? She wasn't some damsel in distress. She wasn't waiting for someone to swoop in and save her. Maxwell leaned forward slightly. I want to offer you something, a chance to change your life, a job, an opportunity to work with me. Lily's eyes narrowed. A job? She repeated, incredulous. You're offering me a job after what happened? He nodded slowly. I think you have potential, and I believe I can help you unlock it. There are rules, of course. He placed a folder on the desk, sliding it toward her. I'll explain them when you're ready, but for now, let's just say it's a way out of the life you've been stuck in. Lily's mind was spinning. She had no idea what he meant, but the offer seemed too good to ignore. She wasn't sure if it was desperation or curiosity that made her lean forward, picking up the folder and flipping through its contents. A contract, a series of clauses that would change her life for better or worse. She felt a strange sense of powerlessness. Here she was, being handed a chance to change everything. But at what cost? What was Maxwell really offering her, and why? Maxwell's gaze softened just a little, as if he were reading her thoughts. You don't have to decide now. Take your time. But just know, if you accept, your life will never be the same. Lily closed the folder, her heart pounding. She didn't know if she was ready for what he was offering, but one thing was clear. This wasn't a simple job offer. This was a turning point, a decision that could change everything, and she was about to make it. Lily sat in the sleek chair, the hum of the city below a distant backdrop to the whirlwind in her mind. Maxwell hadn't said much more after he slid the folder in front of her, his eyes piercing her every reaction, waiting for her to make the first move. She opened the folder again, trying to focus on the thick, professional-looking documents inside. The first few pages were filled with legal jargon, but as she flipped through, she could make out certain phrases that made her stomach churn. Non-disclosure agreements, confidentiality, mandatory clauses, and one that stood out. All services rendered under this agreement will be at the sole discretion of Mr. Maxwell Black. She lifted her gaze slowly, locking eyes with Maxwell. There was something in his expression that made her uneasy. He didn't look at her like the others, like a maid or a servant or someone below him. He saw her, and that realization left her both empowered and terrified. You're not going to tell me what exactly the job is? She asked, her voice steady despite the uncertainty swirling inside her. Maxwell leaned back in his chair, his fingers tapping lightly on the desk, as though considering how much he wanted to reveal. It's a personal assistant role at first. You'll handle various tasks, business meetings, event coordination, scheduling, but there's more to it, if you prove yourself. Lily's mind raced. Personal assistant? She'd never worked in such a position before, let alone for someone like him. He was a billionaire. He moved in circles that she couldn't even dream of. What did he want with her, of all people? And the rules? She asked, her eyes flicking to the contract again. You said there were rules. Maxwell's lips twitched, the barest hint of a smile curving his mouth. There are rules, yes. I'll explain them more clearly once you decide, but let's just say they're for both our protection. Lily shifted uncomfortably. The way he spoke made everything sound so calculated, so controlled. And yet, something about his gaze, something about the way he studied her, like he was seeing beneath the surface, made her wonder if there was more to his offer than he was letting on. She couldn't afford to ignore the opportunity, but she couldn't ignore her gut feeling either. What's the catch? She asked, her voice dropping to a near whisper. Maxwell's eyes narrowed slightly, as though appraising her. You'll have to work hard. Your life will change, but there's no turning back once you sign. You will be expected to follow my directives without question. That's what I mean by rules." Lily's mind buzzed with the implications. She'd never been the type to follow anyone's orders. She was fiercely independent. But the offer was unlike anything she had ever encountered, an invitation into a world she never thought she'd belong to. "I don't know if I can," she started, then stopped herself. She'd been stuck in her life for so long, surviving, scraping by, that now, when faced with a real chance at something different, she didn't know how to respond. Maxwell's voice cut through the silence. "You don't have to answer now, but think about it. There's nothing you'll find more challenging, but nothing more rewarding either." Lily felt the weight of his words. This was bigger than a job. It felt like a turning point, something she couldn't pass up, no matter how much it terrified her. "I'll give you until tomorrow morning," Maxwell continued. "If you decide to accept, we'll go over the finer details. But for now, I'll leave you with the contract. Take it home. Read it carefully." He stood up then, signaling the end of the meeting. Lily followed suit, feeling the sting of both the weight and the promise of what lay ahead. She walked toward the door, but before she reached it, Maxwell spoke again, his voice soft but firm. "One more thing," he said, his tone almost intimate. "You won't be just any assistant to me, Lily. If you take this, I'll make sure you never have to worry about anything again. You'll have a place in my world, and trust me, you'll want that. The question is, do you trust me enough to let me help you?" The door shut behind her with a soft click, leaving Lily standing in the hallway, the city's hum rushing back to fill the silence. She felt the weight of the contract in her hands, its potential, its risks, its promise. Her pulse quickened as the magnitude of what she was about to do settled in. What if she said yes? What if she took the chance? And then, just as quickly, a darker thought crept in. What if she was making a mistake? The following day, Lily woke early, the decision gnawing at her with every passing moment. She'd barely slept, her mind running through every possible outcome. There was no going back from this. If she signed the contract, everything would change. She knew she had to make a choice. Would she stay in the life she knew? Or would she step into the unknown, take Maxwell's offer, and risk everything for a chance at something greater? With a shaky breath, she sat down at her kitchen table, the contract in front of her. The quiet morning light filtered through the window, casting long shadows across the pages. Lily picked up the pen, her hand hovering for a moment, then steadily began to sign. This was it, the moment that would either break her or remake her, and as she signed the last line, she felt the weight of her decision settle deep inside her. Lily sat back in her chair, staring at the signed contract before her. The pen felt heavy in her hand, as if it had the weight of her entire future resting on it. She had never made a decision so quickly, never signed something so binding, so irrevocable. But there was something in Maxwell's eyes, something about his offer that made it impossible to turn away. She folded the contract carefully, placed it in the envelope Maxwell had provided, and stood up. Her apartment, a small, dimly lit space with peeling walls and a leaky faucet, suddenly felt claustrophobic. Everything about it, the chipped furniture, the faded curtains, the worn-out carpet, seemed to remind her of how small her life had been. She was walking away from it. The thought hit her like a rush of cold air. She wasn't just signing up for a new job, she was stepping into another world, one that was entirely unknown to her. And truthfully, that scared her more than anything else. Maxwell had promised her a chance to rise above her current life. But what would that really mean? What price would she have to pay for this? The drive to Maxwell's office was quiet, almost too quiet. The car's leather seats felt stiff under her, the driver's eyes in the rearview mirror giving nothing away. It was all part of the game. She knew it. Maxwell didn't let people into his world without expecting something in return. As they approached the towering glass building, Lily felt a knot tighten in her stomach. The city stretched out beneath them, its streets lined with luxury, wealth, and power. And she, a simple maid, was about to step into that world. She wondered if she was ready. Maxwell's office was just as grand as she remembered it. Polished floors, floor-to-ceiling windows, and a view that seemed to stretch forever. But this time she wasn't the quiet observer from the corner of the room. She was here to stay. Maxwell was waiting for her, leaning against his desk, a calm smile on his face as he looked up from a pile of papers. "You're here," he said, his voice warm but measured. "I'm glad you decided to accept." Lily's heart beat faster. The anticipation from last night had transformed into something else now. A quiet unease. I'm here," she said, trying to sound confident, but the words came out a little shaky. He gestured to the seat across from him. "Please, sit. Let's go over the next steps." Lily sat down, the chair feeling too large for her as she took a deep breath. Maxwell's eyes were focused on her, assessing, measuring her every move. She wasn't sure if it was intentional or not, but his gaze seemed to strip her of every ounce of comfort. He handed her a smaller folder, this one containing more details than the contract. "This is your role," he said. "It's a mix of personal assistance, event coordination, and managing certain aspects of my business, but it will be more than that. You'll be working closely with me." Lily glanced at the pages, trying to absorb the details. A schedule, lists of names, companies, people Maxwell worked with. But it wasn't the job itself that made her nervous. It was the implication of what it meant. "And the rules?" she asked, her voice faltering for the first time. Maxwell leaned forward slightly, his voice softening. "I'll explain them as we go. But one thing you should know up front. I expect you to perform with the utmost professionalism and discretion. I've chosen you for your ability to handle delicate matters. There will be moments when you'll have to make decisions on your own." His words were clear, cold, and unyielding. It wasn't a job where mistakes were tolerated, where second chances were given. It was clear that Maxwell had high expectations, and that his world wasn't one where failure had a place. "I understand," Lily said, though she wasn't sure she did. There was too much she didn't know about Maxwell, too much she didn't understand about the power he wielded. The walls of the office seemed to close in on her as the weight of the decision settled deeper in her bones. "Good," Maxwell said, his eyes never leaving her face. "The first task is simple. I need you to assist with an upcoming event. A gala in a few days. It's a private affair, but your presence is crucial. You'll handle the logistics, communicate with the vendors, and make sure everything runs smoothly." Lily nodded, her mind already racing. She had no experience with events of this scale, but there was no room for doubt or hesitation now. She was already in. "There's more," Maxwell added, his tone shifting slightly. "You'll also be accompanying me to certain meetings, not as my assistant, but as someone who represents my trust. You'll be in situations where you'll have to think on your feet. I need you to be sharp." The pressure on her was mounting, but she kept her composure. "I'll do my best." He stood up then, his presence suddenly towering over her. "I expect nothing less." His gaze lingered for a moment, his words almost a warning. "Remember, Lily, your life is now intertwined with mine. There's no going back." She felt the weight of those words. He was right. There was no turning back. Maxwell walked to the window, his back to her. "You're free to go now. But know this, there's much to be done, and I'll be watching you closely." Lily stood up, her heart pounding in her chest. She didn't know if it was fear, excitement, or something else entirely, but she felt it deep within her. The path ahead wasn't clear, but it was set. As she turned to leave, Maxwell's voice called out one last time, "Lily, remember, there are things in this world you don't understand yet. You'll learn quickly. I hope you can handle it." She didn't turn back. She didn't have the strength to answer him, but she walked out of the office with one thought in her mind. There was no turning back. The gala was just days away, and Lily had never felt more out of her depth. She stood in front of her closet, staring at the clothes she had, old old, faded dresses and worn-out shoes. Nothing suitable for an event of this magnitude. Maxwell had given her a shopping allowance, but the thought of spending his money made her uneasy. He hadn't explicitly told her what to wear, but she knew better than to show up underdressed. The weight of the upcoming event was pressing on her, but it wasn't just the gala that had her on edge. It was Maxwell. The more she worked with him, the more she realized there were layers to him she didn't understand. His words, his actions, they all carried an undercurrent of something deeper. He never fully revealed himself, and that made her wary. But she couldn't afford to question him. Not now. The night of the gala arrived quickly, and Lily stood in front of a full-length mirror in a dress she barely recognized as her own. Maxwell had arranged for a personal shopper to pick out the dress, and it fit perfectly. The silk glimmered in the light, the soft curve of the neckline flattering her frame. But as she looked at herself, she didn't feel beautiful. She felt like an imposter. Maxwell had told her she was ready. He had told her this was her moment to prove herself. But as the car drove through the gates of the exclusive venue, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was about to fall flat on her face. The venue was everything she had imagined, a sprawling mansion with marble floors, gold accents, and crystal chandeliers hanging from the ceiling. Guests mingled in tuxedos and evening gowns, their laughter ringing through the air. Lily felt small amidst it all, but she stood tall, determined to fulfill her role. Maxwell was nowhere to be found when she arrived. She wandered through the ballroom, doing her best to look confident, even as her heart raced. Every few steps, she could feel the eyes of the guests on her, scrutinizing, judging, some with curiosity, others with cold indifference. She kept her head high, remembering the way Maxwell had told her to act. Professional, poised, confident. But as the evening wore on, her unease grew. There was something about the way the guests spoke to her, the way they looked at her, that made her feel like she didn't belong. She had been brought into this world, yes, but it felt more like she was being watched, a subject under a microscope, rather than a participant. Then, she saw him. Maxwell was standing at the far end of the room, surrounded by a group of powerful-looking men and women, their conversation intense and hushed. But as soon as he saw her, his gaze locked onto hers. For a split second, the chaos of the room seemed to fade away. He nodded slightly, a silent acknowledgement of her presence. Lily made her way over to him, heart pounding. As she approached, she could see that his expression was unreadable. He hadn't yet spoken to her since she'd arrived, and she felt a sudden rush of anxiety. "Lily," Maxwell said, his voice low and controlled, "you're doing well." But his words didn't reassure her. There was something else in his eyes, something cold, something distant. He looked at her like she was just another part of the evening's proceedings, not the person he had been training for this moment. Lily swallowed hard. "Thank you. I think everything is going well so far." Maxwell glanced at her for a moment, his gaze flickering with what might have been approval, or maybe just a fleeting acknowledgement. But then, as if something distracted him, his attention snapped back to the group of people around him. He didn't look at her again, not for the rest of the night. She felt it then, the crack in her trust, the chasm that had started to grow between them. She had spent the entire evening trying to prove herself, to show him she could handle this world, but he had barely acknowledged her. And that hurt more than the humiliation at the restaurant, more than the uncertainty of this new life. Later that night, as the guests began to leave, Maxwell finally found her again. She was standing by the large windows, watching the city lights twinkle below, trying to calm her nerves. "Lily," he said softly, his voice almost apologetic. "You did well tonight." But there was no warmth in his words. It was the same thing he had said earlier, almost like a pre-programmed response. She turned to him, unable to hide the frustration building inside her. "Did I?" she asked, her voice sharper than she intended. "Because I felt like I was invisible out there, I spent the whole evening walking on eggshells, trying to do everything perfectly, and you barely looked at me. Did I even matter tonight?" Maxwell's face remained calm, his expression unreadable. "Of course you matter. I chose you for a reason." But Lily's anger was rising now, fed by the cold distance between them. "Then why didn't you act like it? I was supposed to be important, wasn't I? I was supposed to be someone who helped you, someone who mattered." She was close now, standing just a few feet from him. The room felt suffocating, as if the walls were closing in. Maxwell studied her for a moment, his eyes hardening. "You think this is about you?" he asked, his voice low. "You think this is about your feelings, your comfort? This is business, Lily. This is about how well you perform when it matters. I don't have time for emotional attachments." The words hit her like a slap. She had expected him to be distant, but hearing it spoken so bluntly felt like a blow to the gut. She had always known he was cold, calculating, but this was different. This was personal. This was him telling her she would never be more than a tool in his world. Lily stepped back, her heart pounding. "I understand. I'll leave you to your business." She turned to leave, but his voice stopped her. "Lily, wait." She paused but didn't turn back to face him. "What?" Maxwell walked toward her, his footsteps steady. "I'm not saying you don't matter. I'm saying you have to prove you do." Lily's breath caught in her throat, her heart heavy with the weight of his words. She wanted to argue, to yell at him, but instead she stood there in silence, knowing that he was right. This wasn't about feelings. This was about survival in his world. And if she wanted to make it, she would have to fight for her place. Maxwell turned away, his voice cutting through the tension. "I'll see you tomorrow. We'll go over the next step." Lily nodded without speaking, her mind spinning. She wasn't sure if it was the night's events or his words that hurt the most. But one thing was clear. This wasn't just a job. It was a game, and she was about to find out how much she was willing to sacrifice to win. The days following the gala were a blur of meetings, phone calls, and events. Lily threw herself into her work, determined to prove herself. But the more she learned, the more she realized how little she knew about Maxwell's world. He kept her at arm's length, never offering much more than the bare minimum of information, leaving her to navigate the chaos alone. She had been assigned to assist with another high-profile event, the launch of one of Maxwell's new ventures, and she found herself managing a team of people, coordinating logistics, and dealing with demands from vendors and guests. But it wasn't the event that kept her up at night, it was Maxwell. The distance between them seemed to grow with every passing day. Whenever they spoke, it was brief, professional, detached. He didn't offer praise, nor did he show any signs of appreciation. He was always the same, cold, calculating, and distant. But Lily couldn't help herself. She kept thinking about that night at the gala, about how he had barely acknowledged her, and then, just when she was about to walk away, he'd pulled her back in. There was something else, something she couldn't quite place. One afternoon, after another long meeting with Maxwell, Lily found herself alone in his office, organizing some documents. She had started to notice small things about him, things that didn't quite fit. Little gestures, brief glances, the way he would sometimes glance at his watch or phone, as if expecting something. She had been working silently, organizing papers, when she heard the soft click of his office door. She turned to see Maxwell standing in the doorway, his usual cold expression softened by something else, something unreadable. "You've been working hard," he said, his voice low. It wasn't an accusation, nor was it praise, just an observation. Lily nodded, still unsure of how to respond. "I'm doing my best." Maxwell stepped into the room, his footsteps deliberate, measured. "I've been watching you," he said, his tone still guarded. "You have a certain resilience." The words caught her off guard. She'd never expected him to admit to anything resembling approval. "Why are you really doing this?" she asked, the question slipping out before she could stop herself. Maxwell didn't seem surprised by her question. He simply leaned against the desk, his eyes never leaving hers. "I'm giving you a chance, Lily, a chance to prove yourself in this world. And if you're good enough, if you earn it, there's nothing you can't have." The words felt like a promise and a threat. But Lily still couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more going on here. Maxwell wasn't just offering her a job. He was offering her something else, something darker, more complicated. She had seen glimpses of it, the way he spoke about power, about control, about what he could give her and what he could take away. "Why me?" she asked, almost without thinking. "Why did you choose me?" Maxwell's gaze hardened slightly, his lips pressing into a thin line. "It's not about choosing you, it's about seeing potential. You may not understand now, but you will." The cryptic nature of his answer left her unsettled. It was like he was holding something back, something that could explain his motivations, his obsession with control, and why he had singled her out. But she wasn't sure if she wanted to know. That night, Lily couldn't sleep. The words kept swirling around in her mind, echoing through the silence of her small apartment. She tossed and turned in her bed, unable to find comfort. She wasn't sure if it was the weight of Maxwell's offer or the strange tension that had been building between them, but she couldn't shake the feeling that everything was about to change again. The next day, Maxwell sent for her. She arrived at his office, the usual coldness hanging in the air. But there was something different in the way he looked at her today, a sharpness, a clarity. His eyes were colder than usual, but there was also a flicker of something else. "Sit," he ordered, and Lily obeyed without question, her stomach tight with nerves. Maxwell placed a folder in front of her, one she hadn't seen before. "This," he said, "is your next task. It's time to prove that you can handle everything this life demands." Lily opened the folder cautiously. Inside, she found details about an upcoming merger. It was a massive deal, one that could solidify Maxwell's business empire for years to come. But there was a catch. This wasn't just about organizing paperwork or managing meetings. Maxwell expected her to get involved at a deeper level, one that went far beyond her comfort zone. "The people you'll be dealing with aren't just business partners," Maxwell said, his voice low. "They're powerful, dangerous even. You'll need to handle them with care." Lily stared at the papers, her heart racing. She was already in over her head. But this was different. This was a step into the kind of world she had never imagined. "Why me?" she asked again, her voice barely above a whisper. Maxwell didn't answer immediately. Instead, he watched her, his gaze calculating. "Because you're strong. You might not believe it yet, but you will." Lily's mind raced. She didn't know if she believed him, but there was no turning back now. The walls of Maxwell's world were closing in around her, and all she could do was take a deep breath and push forward. That evening, after hours of going through the merger documents, Lily found herself alone in the office once more. Maxwell had left for the night, but she felt the weight of the task ahead. It wasn't just the business, it was the pressure to prove herself, something Maxwell seemed determined to make her do. As she sat at the desk, her eyes flicked to the file, the names, the numbers, the strategy. They were all starting to make sense. But then, she spotted something that sent a chill down her spine. A familiar name. Evan, Maxwell's cousin. Her hand froze, fingers brushing over the paper. The connection between Evan and Maxwell had always been strained, but she had never realized just how deeply intertwined they were. And now, as she read through the notes and saw the dealings he was involved in, Lily couldn't help but wonder if there was more to this family dynamic than Maxwell had ever let on. The pieces were falling into place, but Lily wasn't sure she wanted to know the full picture. She had walked into this world thinking she could handle it, but now the stakes were higher than she had ever imagined, and she was about to learn just how deep the deception went. Lily couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The weight of the merger documents, the name Evan on the pages. It all felt like a puzzle she wasn't equipped to solve. But the reality was clear. Maxwell's world was much darker, much more dangerous than she had first imagined, and she was deeper in it than she ever intended to be. The next day, Maxwell called her into his office. As usual, he was waiting, looking over a stack of papers with his back to her when she entered. He didn't look up immediately, giving her a few moments to stand at the door, her mind still heavy with questions. "Come in, Lily," he said, his voice as steady as ever. She stepped forward, closing the door behind her and taking a seat in front of his desk, where he finally looked up at her. There was an edge to his expression today, a sharpness that hadn't been there before. "I need you to handle a few things for me," Maxwell said, his eyes studying her like she was a puzzle he was trying to piece together. "There are some sensitive meetings coming up. High-profile clients, partners, investors, people who need to see you as capable, but there's more to it." Lily nodded, her heart pounding in her chest. Every part of her wanted to ask questions, to dig deeper into what Maxwell was really asking of her, but she held back. She wasn't sure she wanted to know the full truth, but she couldn't ignore the feeling that her role in this world was changing. "I need you to step up," Maxwell continued, leaning forward slightly. "These meetings aren't just about business, they're about power, and you need to learn how to wield it." She met his gaze, confused but intrigued. "Power? I don't—" "You'll learn," Maxwell interrupted, his tone firm. "When you step into this world, you don't just interact with people, you influence them. You make them want to be in your corner. You make them trust you." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. "But trust is a dangerous thing, and once you've built it, you have to be ready to use it. And sometimes you need to make them think they're in control, when really, you are." Lily blinked, trying to understand. "You want me to manipulate them?" Maxwell's expression softened slightly, a hint of a smile. "I wouldn't use the word manipulate. I prefer strategize. You'll be fine, Lily. I've already seen you do it without realizing. You'll just need to sharpen your instincts. You'll learn to play the game." Lily was quiet for a moment, the implications of what he was asking settling in her stomach like a heavy stone. She wasn't sure she was ready for this. She had never been a strategist, never been the kind of person to pull strings from behind the scenes. She was still trying to figure out how to fit into this world, how to stand on her own 2 feet in the face of it. But there was no going back now. She had made her choice. "Okay," she said finally, her voice steady despite the doubts swirling in her head. "I'll do it." Maxwell's eyes lit up for a fraction of a second, as though he was pleased by her decision. "Good. Then you'll be ready when the time comes." That evening, as she prepared for the meetings the next day, Lily found herself thinking more about Maxwell's words. He was right in a way. She had already been playing the game, perhaps without even realizing it. But now, it was different. Now, it wasn't just about making the right decisions. It was about learning how to control the people around her. She stood in front of the mirror, adjusting the sleek dress Maxwell had bought for her. It was expensive, professional, fitting for the role she was supposed to be playing. But when she looked at herself, she didn't recognize the woman staring back at her. She wasn't just a maid anymore. She was a woman stepping into a world of power, manipulation, and secrets. But at what cost? The next day she arrived at the meeting venue, a high-end hotel conference room overlooking the city. It was luxurious, pristine, and the air smelled faintly of expensive cologne and perfume. Lily's nerves were tight, her hands clammy, but she steeled herself. This was what Maxwell wanted. She had to prove herself. As she entered the room, Maxwell was already there, speaking to a group of well-dressed men and women. They turned when she entered, sizing her up with barely concealed curiosity. She stood straighter, meeting their gazes with as much confidence as she could muster. Maxwell glanced over his shoulder, giving her a nod of approval. He introduced her briefly to the group, but the moment she was out of his immediate attention, the focus shifted to her. She could feel their eyes on her, the weight of their judgment heavy in the air. But this was what Maxwell had prepared her for. This was where she would learn. The meeting began, and Lily listened carefully, absorbing everything Maxwell said, watching how he controlled the conversation. He was a master of subtlety, speaking with quiet confidence, never raising his voice, but always making sure everyone knew his opinion mattered. The others, his business partners, investors, the clients, followed his lead, hanging on his every word, nodding in agreement when he spoke, even when they didn't fully understand the details. Lily watched closely, noticing the small, almost imperceptible ways Maxwell shifted the dynamic. The subtle glances, the pauses in speech that made people lean in just a little more, the way he used silence as a weapon to make others feel the weight of his presence. She could see now what he meant. He didn't just participate in the conversation. He directed it. He controlled it. And as the meeting drew to a close, Maxwell's eyes met hers again, his gaze like a challenge. "See how it's done?" he asked, his voice quiet but powerful. Lily nodded, her mind racing. She had seen it. She had seen how Maxwell turned every conversation, every interaction to his advantage. And she realized then that this wasn't just about learning how to manage logistics or schedule meetings. This was about power. Maxwell had given her a glimpse into his world, and now there was no turning back. But as she stood there, feeling the weight of everything she had to learn, Lily couldn't shake the feeling that the deeper she went, the harder it would be to find her way out. The weeks following the meeting at the hotel passed in a blur of high-stakes decisions, endless phone calls, and meetings that bled into each other. Lily had been thrust into Maxwell's world with the unspoken expectation that she would sink or swim. And despite the constant tension building inside her, she found herself swimming, barely. But she had learned to navigate the undercurrents. She understood the rules now. The subtle manipulations, the calculated pauses in conversation, the silent power moves, all of it. She had become Maxwell's trusted ally in meetings, earning his occasional nod of approval. But with each passing day, the distance between them grew, and she began to question how much of herself she was willing to lose in this world. Maxwell's cold demeanor, his complete detachment, made him difficult to understand. He was a man who played everyone, even those closest to him, like pieces on a chessboard. It was only now that she began to realize how dangerous it was to trust him, if at all. She had seen the way he interacted with people, efficient, detached, controlled, but never personal. He never let anyone in. That is, until the moment Lily saw something she wasn't supposed to see. It happened late one evening. Lily had been working late, organizing documents for an upcoming deal Maxwell was handling. She had just finished a round of phone calls and was about to leave when she noticed Maxwell's office door was slightly ajar. The faint sound of voices reached her ears. Curious, and knowing Maxwell would be gone for the night, Lily approached the door. She wasn't sure what she was expecting, maybe another late-night business call or a few last-minute negotiations. But when she looked inside, she froze. Maxwell was seated at his desk, his usual composure shattered. His eyes were dark, his expression intense. Across from him sat a man Lily didn't recognize, his face hardened with a scowl. It was Evan. Lily's heart skipped. She had heard about Evan, Maxwell's cousin, the man whose influence loomed over every deal, every decision. But seeing him here, face to face with Maxwell, made her uneasy. The air between them was thick with something unspoken. "Do you think I don't know what you're trying to do?" Evan's voice cut through the air, low but sharp. "You're playing a dangerous game, Maxwell. You know what's at stake." Maxwell's voice, in contrast, was calm, almost too calm. "If you're so sure of what I'm doing, then why are you still here?" Evan leaned forward, his fists clenched. "You're pushing things too far. People are starting to ask questions. You can't control everything forever." Maxwell didn't flinch. "I don't need to control everything. I just need to control the right things." Lily's breath caught in her throat as she listened, the words sinking deep into her chest. She had never seen Maxwell like this, his guard down, his sharp, calculated mind seeming to falter for a brief moment. She had never realized just how much his world was built on secrecy and power games, and she had unwittingly become a part of it. She turned to leave, but a voice stopped her. "You've been listening, haven't you?" It was Maxwell. Her heart skipped in her chest as she turned to face him. His expression was still unreadable, but there was a dangerous edge to it now. He had caught her. Lily took a breath, her voice steady despite the nerves rising in her throat. "I didn't mean to overhear. I was just leaving. I didn't know you were having a meeting." Maxwell's gaze softened, but only slightly. He stood up, walking toward her, his steps slow, measured. "It's not your fault," he said, his voice smooth. "You're in this world now, Lily. You're going to hear things you're not supposed to, but that doesn't mean you get to act on them." She swallowed hard. What was that about? He paused for a moment, staring at her. "Evan's been questioning my decisions lately, trying to take things into his own hands. It's complicated." Lily nodded, her mind racing. There was more to Maxwell's family than he had let on. And Evan, he seemed dangerous, calculating in a way Maxwell hadn't been. But what bothered her most was that she didn't fully trust Maxwell either. Something about this world was corrupting her, changing her, and she wasn't sure how much longer she could keep up the act. Maxwell didn't offer an explanation, but his words were enough to plant a seed of doubt. "What do you want me to do?" she asked, her voice low. Maxwell's expression turned thoughtful. "Do nothing, just watch. Keep your eyes open. There's more at play here than you realize." Lily nodded slowly, trying to take it all in. She wasn't sure if she was ready to play this game, but there was no turning back now. Maxwell studied her for a moment before his gaze softened, a faint trace of something unspoken passing between them. "I've put you in a difficult position, I know, but I need you, Lily. I need someone who can handle the pressure, who can make the right calls when it matters." Lily's stomach churned as the weight of his words settled in. She wasn't sure what she was getting herself into, but she had already come too far. The path ahead was uncertain, but there was no way out. The following week, Lily found herself sitting across from Maxwell at another high-stakes meeting. This time, however, it wasn't just about business. It was about power. The room was filled with men and women, all of them influential in their own right, all of them here to discuss a potential merger between Maxwell's company and one of his largest competitors. There was an electricity in the air, a tension that could be felt in every corner of the room. Maxwell was in his element, speaking confidently, his words sharp and precise. But Lily watched him closely. He was always in control, but she had seen the cracks. She had seen how even the smallest shifts in power could unbalance him. The meeting went on for hours, but Lily's mind was elsewhere. She couldn't stop thinking about Evan, about the power struggle that was brewing between the cousins, and about the choices Maxwell had made to get where he was. She wasn't sure if she could trust him, or if she even wanted to. As the meeting came to a close, Maxwell turned to her, his eyes piercing. "How do you think I did?" he asked, as if the approval of the room was not enough. Lily hesitated. "You did well," she said, her voice calm, though inside she felt anything but steady. "But you're playing a dangerous game, Maxwell." He smiled, though it didn't reach his eyes. "That's the only game I know." The days following the merger meeting felt heavy, as if the walls of Maxwell's world were closing in around Lily. She had stepped deeper into the tangled web of power, manipulation, and control, but now it felt different. The stakes had risen, and every decision she made seemed to have consequences she wasn't prepared for. She was no longer just Maxwell's assistant. She was something more, an active player in his world, tasked with decisions that carried weight she couldn't fully comprehend. And yet she kept moving forward, doing what she was told, staying in the background, learning. But it wasn't enough. Maxwell's cold demeanor had begun to chip away at her resolve. He was harder to read now. The small moments of warmth he had shown, like when he spoke to her at the gala or when he had gently corrected her during their meetings, had all but disappeared. His world was pulling him further into darkness, and Lily was left trying to make sense of it all. One afternoon, as she was finalizing a set of documents in her office, her phone buzzed. It was a message from an unknown number. "Meet me at the restaurant on 5th and Pine. 9 p.m. You need to hear this." Her heart skipped a beat. The message was too vague, too cryptic. Who was this? And why had they asked her to meet at such an hour? She hesitated for a moment, unsure whether to go, but something told her she had no choice. She couldn't ignore it. Not now. The restaurant was quiet when she arrived, the low hum of background music filling the empty spaces. It wasn't the kind of place Maxwell would frequent, but it was the perfect place for a discreet conversation. She spotted a figure sitting at the back booth, their face obscured by a menu. She approached slowly, uncertain of what she was about to face. As she got closer, the person lowered the menu. It was Evan. Her stomach dropped. She had never been this close to him before. The rumors about Maxwell's cousin were enough to make her wary, but seeing him in person, sitting there with an air of familiarity about him, sent a shiver down her spine. "Lily," Evan said, his voice smooth, almost too polite. "I'm glad you came." Lily stood frozen for a moment, trying to keep her composure. "What's this about, Evan?" she asked, her voice sharp. She couldn't afford to show any weakness, not now, not with him. He leaned back in the booth, the glint of amusement in his eyes. "You've been working closely with Maxwell. You must be learning a lot from him. I've been keeping an eye on you." Lily's breath caught. The idea that Maxwell's family was watching her, it unsettled her. "What do you want from me?" Evan smiled, a slow, dangerous grin. "It's not what I want from you. It's what you can give me." Lily frowned, her heart rate quickening. "What do you mean?" "The game is changing, Lily. Maxwell's plans, his empire, they're all built on lies. On power, he doesn't control as much as he thinks. He's weak. You've seen it. You've felt it." Lily shook her head, trying to push the feeling of unease down. "I don't know what you're talking about." Evan leaned in, his voice dropping to a whisper. "You don't have to believe me, but I can prove it. Maxwell isn't the man you think he is. He's been using you, manipulating you to get what he wants." Lily's mind raced. She couldn't believe it, not entirely. But there was something in Evan's voice, something that made her question everything she thought she knew about Maxwell. He had always been distant, always kept her at arm's length. But was it possible that he had been using her all along? "I don't need your lies, Evan," she snapped. "If you think I'm going to betray him—" "I'm not asking you to betray him," Evan interrupted, his eyes narrowing. "I'm offering you a way out, a chance to take control of your life. If you want the truth, I'll give it to you. Maxwell's not what he seems. You can have more than you ever imagined, if you choose the right side." Lily stood frozen for a moment, trying to process the weight of his words. She had always known Maxwell's world wasn't as simple as it seemed, but this was something different. "What do you want from me?" she asked, her voice steady despite the storm of thoughts raging inside her. Evan's smile was slow, predatory. "I want you to trust me. I want you to see what Maxwell has been hiding from you. And when you do, you'll understand why I'm offering you this chance. We can take him down together." The next morning, Lily found herself back in Maxwell's office, the weight of Evan's words still heavy in her mind. She had barely slept, her mind turning over the conversation, trying to make sense of everything. Evan's offer hung in the air like a tempting, dangerous possibility. Maxwell entered, his usual composure back in place, but there was something different in the way he looked at her today. Something more guarded. "You're quiet," he observed, his eyes narrowing slightly. "Is something bothering you?" Lily's heart raced as she met his gaze. She couldn't betray her thoughts, not now, but she wasn't sure how much longer she could stay in this world without answers. "I'm fine," she said, her voice steady. "Just tired from the event." Maxwell seemed to accept that, but there was an edge to his expression, like he knew she was lying. He sat down at his desk, folding his hands together. "There's a lot of pressure on you right now, Lily. I know it's difficult, but you're doing well." Lily wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe that everything Maxwell had told her was true. But the seed of doubt Evan had planted was already taking root. Was she really just a pawn in Maxwell's game? Was he playing her like he played everyone else? "You're a part of something bigger now," Maxwell continued, his voice calm. "And that's not always easy to understand, but it's necessary. You need to trust me, Lily." The words hung in the air, thick with meaning. Lily stood there for a moment, the weight of the situation pressing down on her chest. Was she ready to trust Maxwell, or had she already been swept up in his world without realizing the consequences? She glanced at the door, her mind racing with the choices ahead of her. Evan's offer lingered in her thoughts, tempting her with promises of control and power. But Maxwell's world was one of secrets, and Lily wasn't sure how long she could remain in it without losing herself. "Lily," Maxwell's voice cut through her thoughts. "Are you with me?" She looked at him, the man who had pulled her into this world, the man who had promised her everything and nothing all at once. And in that moment, she realized something. No matter what she chose, she couldn't escape the game. It had already begun, and she was in it, whether she wanted to be or not. Lily stood at the crossroads, the weight of her decisions heavier than it had ever been. The world she had entered, the world of power, manipulation, and unspoken rules, had wrapped itself around her like a tight noose. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think straight anymore. The choice was clear now. Evan had offered her a way out, a chance to break free from Maxwell's control, to take a side and play the game with her own rules. But Maxwell's world was seductive, powerful, and she couldn't deny the allure of it. She had learned so much in such a short time. She had seen things in herself that she never knew existed, the ability to influence, to make decisions that shifted the balance of power. But there was something Maxwell had forgotten to teach her: how to trust herself. Maxwell's office was quiet when she arrived the next day. He was already seated, his usual calm demeanor in place, but there was something different in his eyes. He was waiting for her to make a decision, to finally show her loyalty to him, to show him that she was willing to follow him, no matter the cost. Lily entered and stood before him, the contract from earlier in the week still fresh in her mind. But this time, she didn't sit down. She stood tall, her heart steady, her mind made up. "Lily," Maxwell began, his voice smooth but carrying an undercurrent of tension, "I've been waiting for you to decide. You've proven yourself capable, but the question remains, are you ready to fully commit to this?" She met his gaze, her breath steady, her voice unwavering. "No." Maxwell's brow furrowed, the surprise clear on his face. He leaned back in his chair, studying her, as if trying to decipher the meaning behind her words. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I'm not going to play the game anymore. Not the way you want me to," Lily said, her voice strong and clear. "I'm not going to be your pawn, Maxwell. I'm not going to play your game just to climb higher. I'm going to take control of my own life." He stood up, his eyes narrowing, but this time he didn't seem angry. He seemed intrigued. "You think you can do that? Without me? Without this world?" Lily shook her head, but there was a quiet strength in her voice. "I don't need this world to define me. I can create my own future. I can choose my own path." Maxwell's expression softened just slightly, as though he finally saw her for what she truly was. "You're different than I thought." "I'm not who you want me to be," she replied, "but that doesn't mean I'm weak. I don't need you to give me power. I already have it." There was a long pause. the air thick with the unspoken tension between them. Maxwell watched her, as if trying to decide whether to accept or challenge her decision. Finally, he spoke. "You've made your choice," he said softly. "I won't stop you, but I think you'll regret it." "I don't think I will," Lily answered, her voice steady. "I'm ready to take control, to create my own future." The days that followed were a whirlwind. Lily left Maxwell's empire, stepping into a new life, a life of her own making. She took everything she had learned from him, the power of influence, the importance of strategy, and used it for herself. She started her own consulting firm, working with businesses and individuals who needed her expertise in navigating the world of power dynamics. At first, it wasn't easy. There were setbacks, obstacles, moments when she doubted herself. But with each step, she grew more confident. She surrounded herself with people who valued her, who respected her for who she was, not who they wanted her to be. She became the architect of her own success. And as for Maxwell, he remained a shadow in her past, a figure who had played a part in her transformation. But she no longer needed him or anyone else to define her worth. She had taken control of her own life, and in the end, that was all that mattered. Months later, Lily stood at the top of a building overlooking the city, the lights below sparkling like stars. She had come a long way since the night of the gala, since the moment she had first walked into Maxwell's world. She had faced down her fears, fought her way to the top, and proved to herself that she didn't need anyone's approval. She smiled, feeling the weight of everything she had accomplished settle into her bones. The past had shaped her, but it didn't define her. The future was hers to create. And for the first time in her life, she was truly free.